change the podcast title a little bit too, because I was loading and creating like a little web YouTube page for it, kind of thing that I already have established. But originally calling it the art of self-defense and defense against self, and I was like, that's really wordy, really long. And I was like, how about just the art of defense?
Do you want me at some point, if it comes up, to make reference to me being at your school?
If it comes up, just let naturally go. It's not a good or bad. It's something I may even, might self-reflect later on. I think I'm going to probably, low-hanging fruit is just picking people I know, which that most likely will be the case. I was actually thinking about using Greg next, just getting different perspectives. Greg, the guy at the church.
Oh yeah,
yeah. Greg, he doesn't practice anything right now currently, but that might be a good perspective.
You know what? Dennis Brown told me, one of the top kung fu masters on the East Coast. He goes, "You're a martial artist or you're not." He goes, "I know people who haven't trained 30 years, they're still martial artists. I know guys that work out today and they're not martial artists." And what he meant was that what I believe is it's up here.
Yeah.
There's some aspect that's drilled in.
Yeah.
And guys that come and go always drove me crazy.
And that's kind of what this podcast is about. It's more about the mental aspect of martial arts. And that's also why, I've come to a realization that, self-defense is really learning to defend against self, right? As you know, oftentimes the biggest opponent you've ever faced is you.
Is me.
I mean, because how many real altercations have we been in the years that we've trained have ever been another person that defeated us? It was us, even if we lost in the match or won, right? Yeah. And I've come to realize, like, even if I won the fight and kept fighting, clearly I didn't win against myself. Right. I felt for the longest time, I got into martial arts to prove something to myself.
I did too.
Yeah. So it's really just the art of defense, whether it's some martial artists still think they're defending against a potential opponent, and others realize they're forever the opponent.
That's why I always tell the young guys, the old guys don't care what you think. So
okay. All right, so we're gonna get going. Welcome to this channel. We're kind of on a strict shoe budget, so and this is, like I've told Jeff here, this is my third time trying to do a little podcast thing, and I keep getting brought back into it. So ultimately, it's called the art of defense, right? We're really just talking about, many of us got into this because we wanted to defend ourselves against a potential attacker. Either we were going to be a fighter or we truly wanted to defend ourselves on the street, but quickly learned that a lot of times the biggest opponent we'll ever face is ourselves. And so rather than comparing one martial art to another, we're going to try and find some unity in this, and I'll be interviewing various martial artists of various different disciplines. So, Jeff, why don't you start? You're going to tell me, and I'm going to crib notes because I'm not real sharp with all these yet. What martial arts do you primarily practice, and how did you come to it?
Well, I started in Kenpo in '73. And school went out of business. So I wound up after high school in Taekwondo. I was in Taekwondo 5 years. I've been a Kenpo guy ever since. So that's like 48 years. And Joe Louis kickboxing. And I continue to practice them, and I still teach a bit. So, yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So other than still teaching, how does your discipline of Kenpo evolve in your current life?
Well, it does, in the sense that the way I was trained is you keep moving forward. Whether you're punched or hit or what, you keep moving forward. There's days I don't want to get out of bed, even though I'm retired from my job. I get up. One of my first Asian senseis, he'd yell at us, "Get out of bed! Americans don't get out of bed! Get out of bed!" This was in the 70s. Yeah. He said, "Get out of bed. Don't lay there. Don't be lazy." That's always stuck in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just kind of, like this.
Yeah.
It's like a guy I used to work with. He was a Kaju Kenpo black belt. He goes, dude, at this stage, it's in your DNA. You can't even differentiate, man.
Yeah. My stepfather got me into kind of down the road and encouraged me into boxing. And but he was he would wake up, early in the morning, and he was yelling, "When I'm up, everybody's up. You can get enough rest when you die." And he'd also say, "People die in bed," right? And so that's something definitely ingrained. Would you say that's is it become more than a physical practice for you anymore?
Oh,
Right?
definitely. At some point, you get to a point where you're older than everyone around you. Basically, when you get to my age, in mid-60s, you look around at who you came up with, and they're just not there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And it definitely still has a place to push me forward because I know people are watching me.
Yeah.
It's like, and I always tell my people that I've taught for years, if I can do it, you can do it.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're looking at me and I can still do it, someplace they don't have an excuse.
Do you see anywhere in your day-to-day life outside of the dojo that you're practicing Kenpo in maybe a more metaphoric way?
Where it's useful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
applying, maybe tidbits that you can hear your sensei say, do this, do that, and you're like, oh, that's what he meant
Right.
in, say doing the dishes or something.
Right. Well, it's funny you mention that because you and I have talked about this before. Is since I volunteered or since I retired from my job, I volunteer now. And a lot of poor people, it's at a food bank, and they come in and clothes, they're, especially in the wintertime, they're hurting.
Mm-hmm.
And it was put upon me when I first started working there because women would go, Jeff, could you go help this guy with his clothes? And I remember thinking, man, 5 years ago, I just went up and said, pull up your pants or something. And I remember, and it had to be God on my shoulder going, no, you ain't got to do that anymore. Mm-hmm. So I just come up and go, hey, man, could I help you with this? And I thought, wow, I've changed. Mm-hmm. And so in that regard, I still see the self-defense and the action part of the martial art, but I see the other part where it's like, the old Sifu were taught to heal as well, not just destroy. And we've lost that over the years.
Yeah.
And I see the sense in that.
So that's in your life now. Do you see, what'd you do for a career?
I was in the paper industry.
Okay. Is there any recollection to that when you were, a 9-to-5er, and how Kenpo helped you one way or another in the work environment?
Yeah, it helped me. I was never sick. I was there every day.
Yeah.
I would go 2, 3, 4 years and not use a sick day. And finally, as I got into my late 50s, early 60s, I told my bosses, you know what, I'm going to use 1 or 2 a year in the wintertime. I just don't feel like coming in. And also, I work with blue-collar guys. Mm-hmm. I work with truck drivers. I worked with big warehouse guys. And, men will be men. Mm-hmm. I had a guy threaten me 3 months before I retired. I was 61. This guy's like 39.
Oh, yeah.
And it worked out. But, yeah. Okay. Yeah, it very much helped me.
Yeah. So and that's very more in the physical aspect, the piss and vinegar is like I like to refer to. But what about, so you're a family man, you've been married how long?
38 years.
38 years. You've got a couple girls, yes. Right? How old are they?
36 and 33.
And you got grandkids.
Yep.
So this is somewhere for me personally. I'm learning to apply my martial arts to this part, but
sure.
So maybe you can help me and everybody else who watches the softer side of your martial arts skill, that can you see where it's helped you in your marriage, in being a father or grandfather?
Sure. Yeah. It's like you and I have talked about the Gracies. One of the things when they came on scene and they explained how they taught their children. Well, what do you do with children? You wrestle them.
Mm-hmm.
And that was how they got them comfortable with learning. I come from a German Irish family. I've had uncles that were always that way.
Mm-hmm.
That's how we knew we were loved.
Yeah.
It was that roughhouse, getting hung up on a coat hook, stuff like that. I've done that with my daughters. I still do it with my grandkids.
Yeah. I mean, you look at, a little cub or a pup in the wild, right?
Right.
The mom or dad is always kind of roughing them up a little bit and nipping at them and that sort of thing. And maybe in today's society we're getting a little less physical, but I don't want to get too much into that.
But
I
think kids pick up on that. I mean, even like your kids, it's like they see an old guy come in from the winter weather, grumpy, and they just look at me and goes, "Oh, it's just Jeff. He's fine." So
Yeah.
I think that it just kind of shows through that when you make people who are weaker than you comfortable around you,
Sure.
I think that's the highest calling of what we do.
So, I mean, I think it's easy to see from what you've said, but maybe I'll let you put it in your own words. Do you think that studying Kenpo, or at least martial arts in general, has made you a better human being?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, because the reason I picked this up and took to it is right after Vietnam War ended, and I just felt I was too soft. And I didn't get bullied very many times, maybe 2, 3, but it marked me. And I said, that's not going to happen again.
Yeah.
And that sort of built the fire in, because I know where I came from. I was a soft kid, but I wasn't a bad kid.
Yeah.
But you never know which way you're going to go. I mean,
well, I think what martial arts sometimes does, regardless of the discipline, is it puts you in difficult situations.
Yeah.
And this is where I've got a book that I'm working on, but that I talk about the pressure that can be applied to somebody can either make a diamond or it can make dust.
Right.
But it takes the right amount of pressure applied and over time, right? Because if I apply enough pressure, but I don't hold it long enough, it still crumbles, right? But if I apply enough over time, it becomes this wonderful gem.
Right.
But if it's, too much, doesn't matter how much time you move that, and it's just crushed. And I think that's the subtlety of the art, right? Martial, for me, it's always been 2 words: martial artist, right? So martial being more like the science, the physics of law, right? Martial law. This is how the body best moves to maximize the outcome or improve the outcome for yourself.
Right.
But then there's the artist, because you and I are built vastly different, and we're in the same art, but we're going to have to adapt it to some degree.
Definitely.
And or the opponent, right? Because, what you would do to me versus somebody a foot taller than you, right? So, yeah. Now we're going to get into the art a little bit itself, and you are going to reflect mostly on yours, and hopefully we'll see if there's any parallels to other martial arts. But just reflecting on the evolution of your art, do you think your martial art has gained or lost anything compared to its original roots? What was Kenpo when it first originated versus what it is to you now, and or maybe what do you think everybody else is teaching?
Right. Well, a lot of my seniors in the last 10 years have passed. They're in their 80s. It happens to all of us. And that was just a wealth of knowledge. And what happened was, after that happened, the politics took over. So my instructor and I were never very political. We just kind of stayed to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what you had with Kenpo was, no, this technique's better than this technique and this technique. And instead of watering it down, they just kept adding techniques.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the problem with Kenpo. And that's why I've quit teaching a lot of them. To the few people I still teach, I just don't see a reason for it,
Mm-hmm.
you know. But I guess that comes with anything, you know. And I'm older now. A lot of the techniques I did when I was younger, you know. And the funny thing about Kenpo is you get people in their first couple belts and they, oh, Jeff, I love this technique, man. I love it. Oh, okay. 2 years later, a technique's nowhere to be found.
Mm-hmm.
And it's weird. It's kind of like their body goes, yeah, the brain may like that, but I'm telling you, this works over here.
I think we missed a little bit at the beginning. But why don't you tell me, you know, so that the viewers can see, like, who are you in the world of martial arts, right? Like, so you study, we've established you study and teach Kenpo, but tell us just a brief, like, you know, what degree you are. You said you started in 73, but there's some Taekwondo in there.
Yep.
But just give us a little view to establish who you are, because you've got a significant spot in that martial art.
Right. Yeah. Basically, starting in 1999, when all the masters gathered and decided they were going to talk to each other again, I was promoted to 6th degree by Al Tracy and Tim Tucson. And that was cool. And over the years, we just kind of went, and there was a disagreement with my instructor and his instructor. Well, we're taught to back your instructor, so I went with him. And him and I had a difference of opinion, and we didn't talk for 4 years. And we were coming back from church, and I go, I got to call him. It's bugging me. He's going to be mad, but it's bugging me. And I called him, and I go, hey, man, I made mistakes. I'm sorry. And he goes, well, Jeffrey, I made mistakes too. I'm sorry too. And I go, I noticed you promoted me to 8th degree, but I never got a certificate. And he goes, okay, well, I'm coming down for your daughter's graduation. I'll bring it with me. Okay, that's fine. Well, he brought it down. He brought down a 10th Dan certificate. But what he did is, I knew what it was in a heartbeat. It says, all yours now. I'm done.
Oh.
So now everyone can look to you instead of me. And everyone's going, yeah. And part of me, you know, it's like Bruce Judnick, one of the senior Kenpo guys in the world. He walked up to me, and I thought he was going to give me a ration. He's a nice guy. And he looked at me and he goes, Jeff, no one wants to be a 10th. And that is the truth. I would have finished my career at 8th degree, no problem.
Yeah.
But the old man decided, no, it's not going to be that way. And I got attacked on social media. That's another story.
There's always critics.
But I had a lot of these old masters message me, hey man, stick to your guns. I bet.
Right.
Yeah. So I made a lot of new friends.
Well, and I've come to understand that too, is if you don't have critics, you're probably not doing something right.
That's exactly.
But one thing that I've always held to, because I've certainly had critics owning my own school and stuff, is those who are criticizing you are below you. They're either lower in experience, have no experience, or just envious, right?
Right.
And so that can be difficult. But
it was a tough time, because, man, it went on like a year. And I'm a guy, I just put in my time. I grind it out on the mat. You don't have to like me, but I'm out on the mat. And these guys were never out on the mat. And I got challenged a couple times. One guy said I said, fly on out. Yeah, come on. And it never happened, thankfully. But I didn't ask for it. But when the old guy puts it on you, we're trained to go, okay, sensei.
Yeah, no, I mean, that makes sense. I think a lot of martial arts used to, right, hand off and step down was, you got to beat me. and it didn't matter how old I was.
Yeah,
He still had to beat me.
That's true. That was judo.
You know, and one of the things that my professor who black belted me said one time in a conversation was like, he's like, and this is and it aligns even what you said with what you see the current Kenpo being and adding on to stuff and complicating things, because he would say that black belts of his day would get destroyed by blue belts of today.
Sure.
Which is phenomenal. And then I started to think, I'm like, wait a minute. I think at the time I barely got my black belt, or it was still a brown. I don't remember. But I was like, okay, so you're holding me to a higher standard than you were held to, which is good, because now I can, he held me to a high standard, so I got it. And I met that standard. But also it's like, wait a minute, you got your black belt a lot easier than I did.
But did you have guys you came up with, you felt maybe got an easier pass, and he told you, I expected more of you?
Sure. Oh, absolutely. I mean, because over the years, I'd been a member of several different schools because I moved around, and then I've also been a part of a couple of those schools that just closed up, and we had to find other homes, and others went other places, and then they got theirs a little quicker, and then you were like, gosh, did I pick the wrong place?
Right.
You know, and so there's that, and so it's definitely difficult, and so I can relate to how you've said that it's because Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu likes to kind of covet a little bit. Some places like to, is that we take the longest to get a black belt because we have so many things, and that might be because, to be honest with you, I think we steal a bunch of things from all different these arts and apply them. You know, we took the ground fighting from karate, from jiu-jitsu, from judo, from Muay Thai, from Sambo, from, you know, just wrestling in itself. And so we just keep, and then it keeps going because people come from other arts and they bring it. And so now, and because there is not a foundation like that says you must know these things and before you get the next belt, because there's no continuity within schools either, right? I have white belts teaching heel hooks, and I have white belts, and then I have other schools that are not teaching. They're like, absolutely not, and so there's no unity within Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I think we have the IBJJF, which is probably the closest, but then there's a lot of confrontation outside of that, right? Just because there's black belts that have black belts longer than they've existed, but they still don't acknowledge them as a black belt.
Crazy.
So there's the politics of it all and stuff. But bringing it back to, Kenpo, what do you see for the future of Kenpo? Because you're maybe 10th Dan. How many of those are there?
Well, there's a lot more than there were 15 years ago. There's a guy who was Elvis's bodyguard, Dave Hebler. He is a senior Kenpo guy on the West Coast. And I've worked with him in a couple of seminars, and he always tells Elvis stories. Pretty cool, actually. And he came up one year, and shoot, Dave's got to be 85, 86. And this was years after I was promoted. And he goes, I heard there's a lot of, there's been a few more 10th Dans promoted this year.
Where's them? I don't know that. I mean, I've seen karate schools, but I don't know that. I know there are different styles of karate,
right.
And I don't know, are these schools, most of these karate schools, just saying they do them all and they just, bottom line is we teach karate, various versions, or is there a Kenpo school like that? That's where you go.
Yeah, that's pretty much our curriculum. And in Gresham, 20 years ago, there was 4 or 5.
How many are there now?
None. I mean, I was literally, when I was teaching at that dance studio, less than a year ago, we had people wander in and they go, there's no Kenpo schools out here. Yeah, I know.
Wow.
It's crazy. And I think a lot of it is guys my age who have trained people. Those people are professionals. They've got their own careers.
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically everyone I've taught.
So would you say that Kenpo's just kind of dying out?
In this part of Oregon, for sure, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Seattle up there, yeah, it's still pretty big. I
Yeah.
still hang with those guys. But I know of 2 or 3 instructors around my age or older, and they teach 1 class a week,
Mm-hmm.
and that's it. They're just not interested.
How do you see it evolving? Like, okay, so that's kind of the near future, but do you think, let's just say 20 years from now, do you think there'll still be solid just Kenpo schools, or will it become intermixed with other? Because I mean, I'm even seeing we have a handful of Taekwondo schools now that are offering jujitsu, right?
Yeah, well, I've told you there's schools in the South that have teamed with the Machado brothers.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to be the big thing. You give it 10, 15 years.
Okay.
And that's going to make for a stronger martial art.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, grappling is a wonderful art, but we got to get to the ground first. And I think that a lot of jiu-jitsu schools, one of the weaknesses, one of these days so it's not just me speaking on it, but I think that we've certainly struggled away from. I mean, you watch all the old videos of the dojo storms of the Gracies.
Oh, yeah.
There was a lot of smacking, punching. You got to learn to handle kicks. And now you go to most schools and there's none of that. There's little to any standing work. I think some of the Gracie schools still have a combatives program that you have to go through first. And I'm hoping with my school that that because we offer striking classes, but I still have a few people that just come to that. And they don't do the grappling, or and a vast majority just do the grappling and don't do that. And I've been criticized a few times, or not criticized per se, but it gets suggested that because I put my striking between my kids' jiu-jitsu and my adult jiu-jitsu, and a lot of times the parents who have kids that also do it, they're like, can we just put them together so I don't have to go and leave and come back and there's this hour? I was like, no, I kind of want you to do striking.
Right.
Like that will make you a better grappler. Tremendously. But it's hard. Not a lot of people can do, and then it's 2 hours back to back.
I know.
So yeah, I mean that's pretty difficult. All right. So you mentioned this a little bit naturally, and I think that's part of the reason why I picked you to be one of the first in a sense is adding in the spirituality of martial arts. And do you see a connection between your martial art and your own spirituality or religion?
Oh, yeah. When we joined the church we go to now, they had his class called Rooted. And it's 8 weeks, and they're just going through the philosophy and teachings of that specific church. And at the end, they go, you have to tell your story. No matter what it is, you have to tell your story. So I go, okay, I got baptized. I was a freshman. The same month, I saw my first Bruce Lee movie, and I had never put that together. So literally, that walk started the same time. And I was a good kid, but I really think God gave it to me so I'd care about something in my early days. I didn't care about anything except playing football, and I was injured most of the time my last couple of years. So I think, I know that was given to me to help other people. And to me, when people come up to you, Al Tracy, the picture I showed you out there on the wall, senior master, goes, you're not doing this to win a trophy. You're doing this because something happened in your life you didn't handle very well, or not at all. And when people come up to you or come up to me and go, help me, you have to help them.
Yeah.
And I don't care how old I am. If someone comes up and does that, if I can, I'll still help you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it makes me recall, I have a friend who has been suffering with stage 4 colon cancer, and well over a year ago encouraged me to go get tested, and I discovered that I also had cancerous polyps, and it kind of put me on my own spiritual journey. But one of the things he spoke to me once was like, man, why aren't you a pastor? You should, just because I would talk to him about,
Sure.
my faith and that sort of thing, and during those times, and I says, I thought about that, and I was like, I kind of am. I think, the divine God and Creator put me in a position of like, you're going to reach people, right? Not all of us have to go to a church and get on a pedestal. Like was able to reach a lot of people, and for the longest time, I didn't even have to bring up spirituality. I think martial arts in itself just makes people better human beings.
I do too.
Right? Oddly enough, because we're fighting, right? We're gonna fight each other. But man, some of my best friends have been guys I've brawled with.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, I always felt that my philosophy was, and it used to irritate my instructor because he goes, if someone knocks you down, it's going to make the business look bad. But guys had come in and I go, well, where'd you come from? And wherever they come from, Shotokan or Taekwondo or Kung Fu, show me what you got. And I'll show you what I got. And like you said, most of those guys wound up being my best friend.
Yeah, nice. How does martial arts kind of inform your philosophy on life? Is it right there with your spirituality and your religion, or like does it interweave? Like, not to sway your answer, but for me, I have a hard time separating the two.
I do too.
Yeah.
It's and I know you were raised a little rougher than I was, but I remember when I was competing and just what half of me is going, what am I doing here? But the other half is I always prayed, don't let me let down the people who are looking up to me. The people who have put their hand on me and go, come on, boy, get out there.
Yeah.
Get out there. Don't let me let them down.
Yeah.
And I still feel that way. It's grown. I sat there, my oldest sister, we were at a family thing 2 years ago, and she taught me how to drive, get my merit badges and Boy Scouts. And she goes, do you ever just think, I'm happy, I'm so lucky I'm alive? And I go, no lie.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I grew up, I started early on in wrestling as in third grade, and boxing by junior high, and I remember getting in there, and I just had a lot of anger in me because of my life, and it was an outlet, and I also had a kind of stepdad that was gonna chew me up if I got my butt kicked.
Right.
He would just make fun of me, and give me a hard time, and so yeah, I can relate in that sense, just a little differently.
With me it was layer by layer. I had to be toughened up layer by layer, and
why do you think commercialism has led to many martial arts shifts focus in self-defense, or has it?
Oh, it most definitely has. I'm still on quite a few business mailing lists, and everyone has a right to make a living.
Sure.
I just think for guys like me, I needed for every career in martial arts up to black belt, because you and I know precious few people get a black belt.
So for the reviewers now, you had a school once,
yes,
correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. For up to black belt, at some time, you have to have some fear in training, I think, for it to mean anything.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there is schools, I know guys still teach, they think it should be no. At some point, you have to overcome it. But at some point, you've got to, oh man, I remember pulling up to my instructor school in 85 and seeing those cars in the parking lot. Ah, and it was fun, but it was a beating, and I think everyone needs that. And a lot of schools when I was teaching didn't. It was just, and that's where the bad reputation is coming.
How did you balance that with your own training? Because that's definitely one of the things I struggle with owning a school is there's often times where I am putting my own personal needs to train aside,
Right.
so that I can teach. And then there's even been times I think where I've probably compromised what I was teaching so that I could meet my own needs. And so how have you ever balanced that?
When we at the school, it was tough. I mean, it was ironic. We owned a nice martial arts school, and I never had time to work out. I was always teaching or at work. And my wife told me after 2 years, I had a daughter who was a freshman, daughter was a senior, and she was half kidding, but no, she was kidding. But she goes, I swear, if you don't sell your interest, I'm leaving you, because she was doing all the work.
Yeah.
And she wouldn't have left me, but it was true. She was doing all the work.
Yeah.
So that caused the rift with my instructor.
Yeah.
I didn't quit training, but it was tough.
Yeah, when I think, well, originally I wasn't getting enough training. When I moved up on the mountain here, away from the Portland metro area, that it was a good hour and a half from my professor's dojo, and it just became more difficult to get there, and so I was training less and less, and my wife would see the deterioration of my mental health on that, and I would complain, it's just such a hassle to go train, and she said, well, her and my professor both, because I complained to them both started, said, why don't you start a school? You've done this long enough, and initially I was like, oh, this is a great idea. I'm gonna get so much training in, but to start a school in an area that hadn't had a school within 30 minutes away, I think I had one person. I eventually ended up with a couple people that had some experience coming in, but the vast majority, I'm teaching everybody from ground zero. And I didn't get to do a lot of jiu-jitsu because I couldn't spar them because they're just going to get murdered. Yeah. And I went a good year, I think, before I had any decent sparring rounds. And I finally drove to one of the closer schools to an open mat and thought I was going to get my butt handed to me, and went against another guy he's got his black belt now too. I think he got it a little after me, but he was like, man, you just put on we sparred quite a bit, and he's like, you just put on a defensive clinic, because that's all I was focused on. I was teaching everybody how to defend, and because they're basic and brand new. And I was like, yeah, it was when I realized that, man, you're pretty good just teaching, and then also learned because I went from, prior to being a teacher, I was a competitor, and always felt I had to have a couple hard days of training to not lose that sharp edge. Right. And then I realized quickly after that, I was like, maybe I'm wrong, right? So, yeah. So getting into that kind of brings up the internal struggle, right? So martial arts often teaches us to defend against those external threats, right? We're always thinking, am I prepared for a fight? Am I prepared for, and I'm sure you've probably, maybe more verbal arguments and confrontations, even like with our significant other or a family member or a child, and you use your martial arts, your Mr. Miyagi-ness to, combat them in a verbal sense. But how martial arts often teaches us to defend against ourselves, how has it helped you in defeating struggles like your desires, your fears, your ego? I kind of put this in the realm of spirituality and religion too, right? The matters of the flesh, right?
Right.
Being a human being,
Right.
we have those struggles. Um, how's that helped, or how's it not?
It helped me in being a father to the girls, because the best thing you can have is the safest house on the block.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife and I still have these, I call them girls, they're in their mid-30s now, who still call us mom and dad.
Mm-hmm.
They still come around.
Nice.
They still, that's what I always liked. If you have the safest house out of all your kids' friends, you will never lack for kids being over.
Yeah.
And that's what, and they'd come down and they'd bring boys home every once in a while. And I was upstairs and I'd come down, I wouldn't hear anything, and I'd walk across the floor and I'd drag a bow staff out of my weapons rack and drag it across the floor and watch these guys go like that. And I'm not going to tell you my daughters were angels, because they weren't.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
I
yeah.
used to do that all the time.
Now your daughters did train, right?
My youngest did Aikido for 14 years.
Okay.
And made brown belts and quit for a while. And after she had my granddaughter, she told me, she goes, I just don't feel like myself. I go, well, you know what you need? You need to put on the gloves with your old man. And she goes,
tell her you need Kenpo and not.
She goes, that's your answer for everything. And I said, well, and she's been with me 6.5 years, something like that. And she'll get her black belt someday.
All right.
Yeah, it's just that here's what you need.
Okay.
Awesome.
Well, just with some parting wisdom, if you could share one piece of advice or wisdom you've gained from martial arts with someone new to a practice, what would it be? Don't give up.
Don't give up. Don't give up. Just keep moving forward and don't give up, because the rewards are amazing and immeasurable, whether you ever compete or anything you do. Used to, and I'll admit it, I looked down on schools that didn't have fighters, that never showed up to spar, and I shouldn't have done it. And I've seen guys on Facebook and Instagram, jiu-jitsu guys, say the same thing.
Yeah.
I used to make fun of those guys that weren't the hardcore one, and I shouldn't have done it. And I think we all need to watch out for that. Yeah. Because everyone grows at a different pace.
Yeah. One of the things that really stuck with me when I was still just in the brainstorming stage of starting my school. I think I'd already decided to do so, or was doing so, but we hadn't opened yet. And I had a conversation with my professor, and he took me on, and he just says, and I don't remember what started the conversation, but it just stuck with me. Is he said that, remember, because I think he'd only been doing it technically a few years before me, but I went on studying other arts and specifically spending most of my time during martial arts as a fighter. I started in 99, 2000 with jiu-jitsu. Had I just focused on that, probably be farther along my jiu-jitsu career.
Sure.
But he said, just think about all those white belts that started back when we did.
Mm-hmm.
And how many of them are still here training? Mm-hmm. Because back in those late 90s, early 2000s, it was swink or swim.
Oh, sure.
We were going to chew you up, and if you stuck around, perfect. And if you didn't, no worries. And so that kind of stuck with me. It was like, man, what if we would have just maybe kid gloved them a little bit, right? And kept them around and let them mature at their own rate, right? Maybe it would have taken them 2 years to be ready for a live round versus most guys want to do it in the first 2 days. But then they would probably still be here. And so that really stuck with me. And I I kind of started to get away with that, get away from that after about 3 years. I started with that originally because I had to, because I had nothing but mostly brand new um, martial artists. But after about 3 years, I had all these champions, these kids and adults winning medals, and like I have to say the commercialism got the best of me a little bit, and it was
It's easy.
we were growing and big, and then I had this epiphany, this awakening of like, whoa, that's not what this is about. This is about making everybody a better human being.
Mm-hmm.
So if you train in your martial art for however long, right, you should be better for it.
Yep.
But not, you should not be chewed up and spit out, right? And I think there needs to be some hardening by fire a little bit.
Sure.
But the master should know, like, I think of it like as molding clay. I've actually, the book I'm creating of how to become a master teacher, master coach, and this will apply to other things, but I use the picture of molding clay, right? Because that's what I'm doing, is I'm molding this clay, and I have to know when that pot is ready for the kiln, right? To heat it up. And sometimes it might not be. If I heat it up too fast, it either cracks, it's not the shape we want. It's just the finished product's not
Right.
ideal. And I think that hopefully there's a balance, right, in between. And that's the hard part. But yeah, I agree. Don't give up, and pick the one that like we talked about a little bit about religion. I kind of feel like martial arts sits in that realm. Is there's a lot of different ways to the man upstairs. There's a lot of different ways you can defend yourself. Pick the one that resonates with you,
Mm-hmm.
and probably don't settle into discouraging anybody else's. I think
Sure.
that a hard time. I think in jiu-jitsu, we're probably the young ones on the table, right? We're the youngest. I don't know if anything else has started to come up. I haven't paid attention enough, but we're probably we're only like 30 years old, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're the new kid on the block comparative, and a lot of times, we like to poke fun at the old man.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And but
that's human nature.
It is. But I think that that's our responsibility as us as black belts of any martial arts is hopefully, I think that's part of our evolution, right? Because I was probably there one time too, martial,
Yeah.
And so yeah.
Well, the guy isn't. Last thing is, after I was promoted, was attacked on social media. We had our masters gathering in Vancouver, and all the guys from Seattle and Oregon, and we're all getting together. And I walk in, and I'm still wearing my plain black belt, and we all line up. And one guy named Todd Durgan came over, and him and I, in the past, we've kind of went like this. We're both physical. And he put his arm around me and looked over at his instructor and goes, "See that guy over there? That's the only guy I'll accept rank from." He goes, "You're our guy."
Yeah.
That meant everything.
Oh yeah.
I just went like that.
Yeah.
He goes, "You're our guy. We know you."
Yeah.
So there you have it.
Yeah. Well, and at the end of the day, like, I think that if martial arts has ever taught me anything, is that you know you once you master the art truly, it's because you've mastered yourself. They're all just a different way to know thyself and control my body. And a trained fighter will always dominate an untrained fighter.
Yep.
If we start to compare different martial arts to different martial arts, we might as well be comparing different lifestyles to different lifestyles.
Yeah.
Hey, I don't really like how you live here in Oregon. You guys dress way too warm. You're always wearing this, you're always wearing that. Well, yeah, if I lived in the tropics, I'd live a different way.
Sure.
It's very much the same thing with nutrition, right?
Sure.
Diets, right? Like, if you lived in the tundra, good luck being a vegetarian, right?
Yeah.
But if I live in the tropics, I might all just eat mostly fruit all the time, right? So yeah, I appreciate your ability to come in here, your humility at your age. Not to poke you as an old timer, but what you've provided for me, as what my judo senseis have done as well too, is it used to be able to collapse on the, gosh, I'm just old. I'm just old. But when I'm training and talking to guys in their 60s,
Mhm.
I, it feels silly. It's like when
Oh,
a
I know.
20 or 30-year-old guy talks to me. My judo buddy that I get partnered with a lot at practice. He once I'm old, and he's like his mid 30s, and I'm I kind of feel spry compared to him a little bit.
Sure.
But then I look across and I see a couple of my senseis in their 60s and they're spry.
Yeah.
They look as spry as I did in my 20s and 30s.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh man,
It's
motivating.
That's my daughter's Aikido sensei. He'd be out there running across the mat, going on one finger, doing rolls, and I'm like, that was his thing, man.
Well, and I think it's like you said before the interview off camera was when you realized that this was way more about health. And I agree. I think that I encourage a lot of people. I think COVID taught us a lot, right? A lot of times,
Right.
a lot of people who suffered from COVID were suffering because they were unhealthy. They were just overweight, poor
Not enough
nutrition,
sleep.
not enough sleep, not getting enough exercise,
Right.
all these different things.
Right.
And I think martial arts could literally just be the answer for, because I'm a trained collegiate strength and conditioning coach. Like I know how to exercise very specifically better than most, but I hate doing it. It's boring. But I like a paycheck. So it was always the work I would do and the paycheck was how it would make me perform better in a sport.
Right.
But martial arts doesn't have to be a sport. It can just literally be, gosh, I need to go move my body. It's going to be a lot more fun, kind of, even if I'm just pretending to be a ninja or a samurai, than it is.
Yeah. It's funny you mention that because lately, in the afternoon, I just turn off TV with all this political stuff going on, and I go out in the garage and I just swing weapons. I swing my bow staff or the boken, which is the old katana, nunchaku. I'm certified in those, and it just feels good to get. There's something primal about it. Just swinging wood around like that.
Nice.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, well, that's awesome, and I think that I don't know a lot about Kenpo, but I've known you enough to say that it's done your body good. Like I've you come and train with me, and there's not a lot of 60-year-olds that can do that. There's not 40s and 50-year-old guys, so you're that it allowed you not only mentally to be unafraid to come in, right? And be humble to do so, but also you're physically capable to break a sweat and get out there and do it. And so that's pretty good.
Sweat I do.
Yeah. Awesome.
Well,
thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Aaron. All right.
Yeah.
Come on. You want out? Yeah, that went pretty good, I think.
Yeah, not so bad. I think I'm gonna play with my little questions here.
Hey everybody, thanks for watching The Art of Defense, and hopefully you got what out of it, what I'm hoping to put back into martial arts. And I think originally martial arts started out as teaching people to be mindful and defending against what was currently a threat to themselves or society. And today we're living in a much safer time than probably we ever have in existence. And the likelihood that most people are ever going to get into a fight are probably very slim, though catastrophic. So, it's kind of like living in a houseboat and not knowing how to swim. You can probably survive just fine. But if you fall into that water, it's very, very dangerous, right? So I hope you never get into a fight, and the likelihood that you will is very slim. But what I think martial arts does is it teaches us to handle difficult situations. You might get into more of a metaphorical fight with, a situation at work, at home, or even within yourself. And then martial arts really has taught you to hone in on that mindfulness, that skill, how to move your body, but also control your mind in that situation. And I feel really fortunate to have had Jeff Jones in this interview for the first one. I've always been very blessed in a unique way that I've had multiple martial artists of black belt quality. I've had a black belt in Taekwondo train with me. I've had a black belt in Tai Chi train with me, Kung Fu, Kenpo, and I've even had high-level martial artists and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guys that were purple and above bring their children to train with me. And that's a real honor because I teach martial arts from a mental capacity and less of a physical one. We're going to get physical if I can't intellectually work my way out of this fight. And I think that's kind of what I'm trying to get to is I think the traditional root of martial arts may be getting lost and watered down for various different reasons. And I hope to meet with other black belts, other masters, other shifus, other senseis, and professors of other arts to talk about it. And let's see what everybody seems to think. So if you like what you saw, please subscribe, share it. And if you didn't, or if you have some tidbits of information, post them in the comments. So, peace.